This session is titled Learning Foreign Languages. I guess I'll clarify that it's about learning human languages, not computer languages such as JavaScript and Python. The language of this talk will be in American English, which is only a foreign language to some people. VetSecCon made me the first talk of the day for some reason, and the only talk right now, so I guess if you're attending the conference, you have to listen to me. I'd like to start with a shout out to volunteer Ron Werner, the president of, or it's actually in German, it'd be Werner, the president of VetSec Tom, the wonderful Jake, and other VetSec members, veterans of all services as well. Now you should see About Me slide. I'm American. I'm tuning in from Germany, where I live currently. I'm a C manager at GDIT, supporting a contract for U.S. Army Europe. I'm also a veteran as well as a reservist. I'm currently a civil affairs officer, a job that puts my language skills to use. I used to be a cyber operations officer. In the Army, I learned to become a lethal warrior, raining death by PowerPoint. I will try not to do that today, not to kill you by PowerPoint, but I will try to be more interactive. That's why there's audience questions on all of my slides. And if you have some input, you can put it in the chat. I'm monitoring the chat. Yep, right now my time it's 4:30 or 16:30, but it's a great time for me because I got to sleep in. So I'll be monitoring the chat for any comments because I know you all have diverse experiences. A lot of people come from linguist backgrounds and have been sent to school to learn languages that few others of us learn. A lot of veterans have traveled the world. So I welcome your input and we'll be monitoring the chat, though I may not have time to share everything in chat since I have 30 minutes for the talk. So my hobbies are cycling, travel, shooting weapons, writing. I love the Elder Scrolls franchise. In the slide, you see a photo from me last night where my friend captured me being killed by a serial killer at Frankenstein's castle. Okay, and I'm doing this talk because I speak a few languages. But again, I welcome your experience. I speak enough languages. I can get around in French, German, and so forth. There's also cool people I'm jealous of who are veterans who have learned languages like Farsi, Dari. So that's why I welcome your input. Now, enough about me for now. I'll move into the agenda. We'll start with talking briefly about the benefits of language learning. Ron speaks only Google Translate. That's okay. That can be a good start, as you might learn later in the talk. Talk about the importance of pronunciation. Talk about language proficiency evaluations, resources for learning languages, questions and discussion. Sometimes I go quickly, so it might end before schedule and then you have a longer break. But I do welcome comments. Edward says, I'm definitely not fluent in anything except English. The best I've done is enough to be polite in about 5 languages. Well, politeness is a way to start. And in the resource, I'll talk about phrase books and how basic phrases can help you. Wow, William's a retired Russian linguist. We have a former Farsi Dari linguist. not a 3-3, but 2-2 is passing, and I'm 3-3 in French, which is a simpler language, and DLA train Arabic linguist. I knew we would get some people with varied skill sets here, so you could probably teach me a little. Now, I'll move into the benefits of language learning. You've all probably heard about some benefits, how it's good for the brain, but I'll share a personal experience. This month, I took a cruise through Central Europe. It started in Budapest, Hungary, and ended back in my home country of Germany. So I realized that we'll be traveling through Hungary, Slovakia, Austria, Germany, and well, I don't know Hungarian because that's a really complicated language to learn, and admire people like the the teacher Lindy Boats, who has learned Hungarian as well as 8 other languages, because that's a tough language to know. I don't know Hungarian, but I knew Slovak. Well, in Austria they speak German, and in Germany they speak German, so it's really nice being able to interact people with most of the countries I visited. And one meaningful experience was visiting with a Slovak family. I haven't really studied Slovak in a few years, but once you learn a language, I think you always retain some of it. So if you were a linguist and a former linguist who learned a language a while ago, I think you do retain some of it even if you never practice, and it will be easier for you to pick it back up. So visiting the Slovak family, I greeted them in Slovak, and then the first question they asked me is, "Are you Slovenka? Are you a Slovak girl?" Well, here's a picture of a Slovak girl, and here's another picture of a Slovak girl, and here's a picture of me wearing a German dirndl. I don't really think I look Slovak, but that was the first question they asked me. So you can really make a good impression on people, even if you learn a few words in their language. Now, I'll move into pronunciation, and because I think that's important. I've lived in Germany, I work among Americans, and a lot of people complain to me that people never speak to them in German when they try to speak German. Yeah, exactly William's experience. The kid says in perfect English, we all speak English here. We don't have time for your Scheiße Deutsch. And they do spend most of their elementary school learning English. It's very common for people in Central Europe, Northern Europe to spend 13 years learning English before they graduate high school. But part of this problem seems to be accent. And also bear in mind, not everyone speaks English, like in Germany. Germany used to be 2 countries, East and West Germany, and a lot of people in East Germany learned Russian in school instead, especially the older people. They've encountered Germans who don't know English. They're rare, but they encounter them. And one of the keys to getting people to speak in your target language, especially if it's the language of a country where most people learn English, first try to sound less like an American. The accent reduction is key to having more conversations in your target language and being understood. So learn the sounds of your language. Like learn to sing the ABC song in your target language. In English, the ABC songs begins with ABC. In German, the ABC song begins in A, B, C. All the sounds are completely different. So learn the sounds of your language and start pronouncing things correctly, even in your head, especially in your head. One of the activities you can do right now is to try spelling your name in your target language after you've learned to sing the ABCs. So for instance, my name is 0xB, spelled 0xBEA. In German, it's 0xBEA. So basically every letter is spelled differently, and it can actually be pretty hard to give people your name, your phone number, and your address in a different language. But when you live in a foreign country or you're traveling through a foreign country, it's a useful skill to have to tell people your name when you're making a reservation in a restaurant or something. Now, note some sounds might not exist in your native language. I'll give an example in the next slide. For instance, Japanese people and Korean people frequently confuse the sounds r, l, the R and L sounds in English, and English native speakers struggle with tonal languages such as Mandarin Chinese. So, in summary, for pronunciation, I would say reduce your accent, though it might not disappear completely. Pronunciation will vary based on the region of the language, and know that when a person has an accent, it means she can speak more like one more language than you. So don't be ashamed if you do maintain an accent, but try to pronounce things correctly. So I'll give an example of minute pairs. These are tones in Chinese. Were you able to hear the audio? Okay, I think I have to unplug my microphone and turn up my speaker loudly and hope it works for this second. Just let me know if you can hear it. You should hear them sing ma 4 times. Okay, yeah, sorry about that. Guess that's kind of soft, but some people were able to hear it, and you can look more into Chinese tones. So a lot of English speakers struggle with the tones and will frequently say the wrong tone, but in a tonal language like Chinese, different tones have different meanings. So actually I can say it. So the tone for ma, 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 ma. You can, being a native speaker, I'm not quite sure how, it's just taking it for granted, but if you can't hear the tones, then you need to work on it, because ma is the word for mother, and if you say ma, it means horse, so completely different meanings, but phonetically they are all ma. Of course, people will understand by context, but often the difference between sounding like an American and sounding like more like a native speaker is learning the tones. And when you show more proficiency, people will be more willing to speak to you in your target language. Speaking of language proficiency, I will now speak about language proficiency evaluations and standards. The CEFR is the EU standard for assessing language proficiency, which makes it one of the most widely used frameworks. I guess the text is a little small, but you can look it up and see descriptions and try to evaluate yourself. It is possible to take an actual test. I've taken the German test by TELC a few years ago, and it said I'm B1 level. The tests include reading, writing, and interaction. So, not reading text, generating text, and for my particular test in German, it involved being placed with another tester, and you're given a situation and being moderated, like plan a party with the person you're testing with, and you plan it in German. So if you do have a CEFR rating, it's good for job applications. The thing I did a screenshot of was NATO levels and CEFR levels. Notice they're in the right, or yeah, on the right, there's a NATO IS test score, and the scores seem to align more or less with DLPT test scores. Like if you scored a 3.3 on your DLPT, you guess you'd probably be upper intermediate. I think you might be more B1, but you could be B2 level in CEFR. You scored a 2.2, maybe you're A2 or B1 level. Yeah, if you're working in Europe, that's something to be more familiar with. There are many other assessments for language proficiency. Many of you are linguists, so you will have taken the DLPT. That's a test designed for linguists. So a problem with that is that linguists receive more languages than they produce. So the DLPT doesn't test your writing, it doesn't test your speaking. For most languages, it's just a multiple choice. And thanks for sharing the resource, Japs. So other assessments to be aware of if you're learning a language. There could be a test specifically for that language. In Mandarin Chinese, there's HSK levels. That's also mainly in China. If you go to Taiwan, there's a different test. The Korean test seems to be topic. But the most important assessment is probably yourself and your social circle. How comfortable are you using the language in everyday situations? And what's also important is how much have you improved, since it's really hard to be fluent, but you can show a lot of improvement. And great, Keith says he took the DLPT last month. If you want to share, you can share what language you took, and do you think your score reflected your actual proficiency? Looks like Jax did a DLPT in 2019. I took my French DLPT earlier this year around June. Okay. Thomas took his in August. I mean, one question to think about is if you were sent to an Arab country where you survive, and as a linguist, you only need to listen and read language primarily, but a lot of life situations will may force you to write and speak the language, so that might take work. So they talk about language learning resources to help people who are traveling. Like Jax is starting Spanish. He or she is prepping for a trip to South America. Great. Yeah, Thomas is able to interact with the population, so that's great. Yeah, language learning resources. One helpful thing to have, especially for travel, is a phrase book. It provides a quick reference for everyday situations. Very compact and portable, so you can read it while you're riding the bus or the metro and so forth. There's lots of language learning softwares out there. That includes free apps like Duolingo and Memrise. Not the Even though I've done a lot in Duolingo, like I've done all the achievements in Duolingo, I can't say I'm the biggest fan of that because these apps gamify language learning, and in the end, language learning isn't about getting a high score. It's about actually being able to interact with real people. The DLI Gloss website, which some of you are familiar with, is a great website that has lots of news and media. Edward prints off a sheet with basic phrases. Yeah, I think cheat sheets are still super helpful, and phrase books have those. With Google Translate, sometimes it gets it wrong, especially for obscure languages, and Google Translate also struggles with gendered languages. It will usually suggest what to say if you're a male, but sometimes that differs if you're a woman. So be careful with Google Translate. And like the literal translation of how are you? Like how are you? If you translate it literally, that might not be what people actually say. Language partners are a good resource. Up to now, these resources have been about language reception. With a language partner, you can start producing the language, you can write, and you can talk to them. But they might also want to learn English. So if you're not careful, you might just become their English teacher. And if you're really struggling with that, you could consider live classes and tutors, which are often very affordable. Now, if you're pressed for time, you might be tempted by influencers who say you can be fluent in 3 months or something. It is possible to become quite fluent if you put the work to it. And honestly, you start getting benefits even if you learn a little, because most people don't learn foreign languages. So if you start learning a little, you'll be better than 90% of people. But beware shortcuts. Language learning takes time and work. Some people have learned languages through significant others. I had an experience with that. In my last international relationship, a lot of language learning took place. I learned, he learned a lot of English, and I learned none of his language. So, yeah, there was a lot of language learning. But the one benefit a significant other can provide is that you can learn about a different culture and nuances. Since this is a military and veteran community, obviously beware of foreign influence. If your significant other is too young and too attractive for you, then they might not actually just be interested in you for a language exchange. Ultimately, you must put your own effort into learning a language. He has a buddy who learned Japanese quickly because of a significant other. That's great. On the other hand, I know Americans who have been married to foreign people for many years and haven't learned any of their language, so results definitely vary. Uh, and it's great that family members have helped you learn languages. Yeah, families are can be a great resource as well as friends. You don't always have to date someone to learn a language. So, side effects of learning a language, you might have a more diverse taste in media as you not only watch English shows, but you start watching foreign language shows. You might find yourself using multiple keyboards. You have an expanded friend group if you game, like me. You might start to understand the foreign language chat and have a few laughs. Most importantly, you'll have more meaningful interactions with others, and you'll gain the ability to write, listen, and speak in another language. William Dunn said, I think the biggest thing about foreign languages that hold a lot of linguists back is being afraid of making mistakes. Yeah, that's something that holds a lot of people back. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. I mean, try to pronounce things correctly, but when people see they're making an effort, they'll work with you. And the key is being understood. Even if your grammar is perfect, if you're understood, then that's an accomplishment. Wow, Jessica used her language skills recently with Afghan refugees. That's great. But learning a foreign language has helped Jessica help the Afghan refugee effort, it seems. Okay, there's only a few minutes left. So that's the end of my talk. Feel free to add more comments and then get ready for the next talk. Thank you for listening to me. I'll post a link to my slides. They're currently on OneDrive, so I'll just post the OneDrive link in the chat.